Tim Walz signed a bill making Minnesota a sanctuary state for child sex changes.
I'm gonna come.
You know what I'm like? You know, it's just another thing that's a bit weird. It's weird. He called conservatives weird, and this is the shit that you dig up when you go and look up fucking Tim Walz. This is the stuff you get. But conservatives are weird. Trump's a weirdo. You know what I mean? J.D. Vance is a fucking Vance. J.D. Vance is a weirdo. It's hilarious, but these guys are brilliant. The Democrats are brilliant. Kamala's brilliant. We know how brilliant she is.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
We know. We know how fucking great she is. So let's read about that, if you don't mind, if I may. Newly minted vice presidential candidate Tim Walz signed a bill in April 2023 that made his state a sanctuary for child sex changes, promoting tourism for such radical medical interventions in defiance of states that restrict them. Dubbed the Trans Refuge Bill. Oh my God, it's like, I hate that it's worded like they're fucking under fire. Like trans people are just under attack.
Just attack. Start raping everybody.
Trans people. That's what goes through. That's what trans people think that conservatives and Republicans are constantly thinking about trans people. We're not after you. No one is after you. You have the same rights you had before you were trans. Are you saying that you don't have, that you didn't have rights before you were a trans person? Because you did. Even if you don't know about it, you had them. You had the rights. And then you become trans. Whatever fun stuff went on there, you become trans. And all of a sudden, what? You don't have any rights? Are the rights gone? Oh, or the rights that you're referring to, you being allowed to, as a grown man or a grown woman, whatever the case, use the opposite bathroom with children in there, or use a locker room of the opposing sex that you were given, that you are naturally. Are those the rights that you're talking about? Because those aren't rights. You have a right to change in the locker room, but your right to change in the locker room, it's the locker room that you belong in. Okay, there's a structure here that society has built. It's very normal. I know normal's racist, man, but it's normal. There's a restroom for men and there's a restroom for women. There are sports for men and there are sports for women. Now, there are reasons why these things exist. Okay? There are reasons why there's a restroom for men and a restroom for women. And I think we can all agree what those reasons are. I don't need to lay out that when you create, here's the thing, when you create things, when you put rules in place, policies, procedures, it's never to represent the geniuses among us. It's never to represent smart people. Smart people know what to do. Most smart people don't really need a helmet law when they ride a motorcycle. But we had to create that law because if we don't, the more larger percentage of the population that are retarded go, fuck it, and then they die. Which, hey, it's a conversation for another day. But we don't want them to die. We don't want dumb people to die. Okay? But we also don't want women to be subjected to psycho dudes trying to get glimpses of them, because that's what's going to happen. We can't have that because it's weird, and people have the right to not have to deal with that. What about their rights? Since we want to talk about rights, what about the rights of people that don't want to be subjected to some fucking creep who wants to play dress up and use women's restrooms? It's not. Their rights are being infringed on by you creating these new rights that no one's ever addressed before, ever. Is that why you think it's progressive? So this was dubbed the Trans Refuge Bill by supporters. The law grants legal protection to children who travel to Minnesota for so-called gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers, reconstructive genital surgery, and hormone therapy, as well as the medical practitioners who provide it. The law prohibits Minnesota courts or officials from complying with child removal requests, extraditions, arrests, or subpoenas related to a child's sex change procedures received in Minnesota, even if they're a crime in another state. So if your kid hears about this, if your kid reads about this, they find out about this, and they want to be trans, and you won't let them because they're not 18, and you know what's best as a parent, and you do. You do. You're going to then, your child is going to run away. Your child is going to find a way because they read online all the time that they're going to commit suicide as a trans person if they're not able to express themselves. So they're going to avoid that line of shit, and they're going to go to Minnesota. They're going to get things done to their body that you, as a parent, as a legal guardian of this child, has not subjected them to. You do not agree with it. But nobody can be held liable. The people in Minnesota that do this to your kid, which is insane, by the way, they're not going to be held responsible. Well, what are we, fucked? Exactly. You're exactly fucked. I find the whole thing strange. I'm going to be honest with you. It's very strange. And, yeah, it's wrong. It is wrong. The law makes seeking gender transition procedures for minors a factor in some assessments on whether a Minnesota court has jurisdiction to make an initial determination in child custody cases. It also gives courts temporary emergency jurisdiction if a child comes to Minnesota from a state that refused them the procedure. So again, if your child runs away from home or is accompanied by somebody that is allowing this behind your back, however the case may be, however the child is to get to Minnesota, if they decide, I want to have a sex change operation done to me, and they get it done, the state of Minnesota has jurisdiction over that decision. There is nothing that you can do as a parent. It is taking power away from the parent. Another huge contradiction when it comes to the topic of education. It's bananas. I'm telling you. Dude, if they had the option, they would take your children, and some places have actually said this. If they had the option, if there was children and under the custody of their parents were not allowed to get sex change opportunities, sex change operations, hormone blockers, you name it, they would take your child from you. That is what they want. That is so woke, and they love it. They love how progressive it is to take your children from you and take their genitals from them. It's sick.
I'm gonna come.
No. So there's that. It's fantastic, isn't it? How all this works. When you really read it and you break it down, everybody's always like, how are you, aren't you tired of politics? No, because every day I read some shit like this, and I can't be tired of it. How could anybody say that during this time? Republican lawmaker who criticized the bill argued it undermined parental rights and would lead children down a dangerous slippery slope of experimental life-altering gender treatments. Minnesota State Representative Lee Fink, a transgender identifying man. Oh, fuck me. Fuck me. Hey, what now? Lee Fink, a transgender identifying man who's a sponsor of the bill.
Why are you gay?
He said, or she said, I don't know. It's a man, transgender man. Quote, emergency jurisdiction is necessary in this bill because of what we are doing. What we are saying is that parents have a right to receive gender-affirming care if they live in South Dakota. And if South Dakota is not going to allow those parents to provide for the best care for their child, then Minnesota can do that. And if that's going to lead to custodial decisions, then we need to be able to have temporary emergency custody of the state of Minnesota for those parents to have their ability to provide for their children. So the picture you're trying to paint is a family dynamic where the parents really want their kid to be able to get a sex change for some odd reason. I don't know, whatever. That's the picture you're painting, right? That dynamic. And you know, North Dakota, it won't let them get these things done to their child because it's not allowed there. So they're saying, oh, you can travel to Minnesota. It's a safe haven. It's the trans motherland. You travel here and we'll do whatever you want to your kid. We'll take off whatever you want. We'll add whatever you want. It's very odd. And we all know the truth. What that bill lays out, sure, it helps with that scenario that I'm sure is so common. I'm sure there's so many parents out there just dying to let their kid get a sex change. No, the only ones that are doing that, and the only parents that are on board with that are the parents, and you know who they are, the parents that everything's got to be about them. Okay, because letting your underage child take hormone blockers, puberty blockers, take fucking, get operations done on their child, sex change, irreversible things. The only parents that would be okay with that are the ones that want to be around liberal, high in the community, left-wing friends of power and go, look at my son. Used to be my daughter, but look at my son. Aren't I brave? Aren't I a brave parent for doing this? For abusing my child? By doing something that they could easily regret in their 20s? And they can't do anything about that? Is anybody going to talk about that suicide rate? The children that turned 26 and one day, and they used to be a little boy. Now they're a woman. Now they're confused. Now they're learning things on their own. And they're learning how much of a psycho cunt of a mother they had that thought this was a good idea because it made them look great at the golf club.